So, without the development of discriminative intelligence, then one's development most likely will stay in a previous level of adaptation.
Yeah.
There's this thing in the teaching of Adi Da says is that if you don't adapt to something, transcend it, you can't go beyond it because it's beyond something. So if you don't develop discriminative intelligence, you don't develop mind, if you don't develop will and intention, then your understanding will be in a lesser or a previous level of adaptation, which
myopia,
which was corresponding either to a pre-verbal unconscious state of either first stage development or a dream-like state of a second stage feeling dimension where you don't have the idea of what is happening, you're just lost in the feeling. So one of the things that this third stage is characterized by is the feeling of independence, but yet still dependent.
Right.
So we have this kind of struggle, or I guess one of the oscillation, or one word that keeps on repeating itself in Adi Da's teaching is called dilemma.
Right.
Which is kind of this Chinese torture, as you kind of pointed out.
Well, there's two stages of life. The background mood was dependence. Mommy, can I have it? You know, what do you think about this, Dad, what I made? All that kind of, there's a background mood. Now, with the onset of the third stage of life, the feeling of independence comes about in a new way. Not the independence of the little kid, but a new, true, the autonomy of the self, my ideas. There's a kind of an independence there.
From mother and father.
And friends even, you know, the elementary age ideas. Two, I can look at everything and think about my ideas, and I'm no longer mythic in the way Odysseus was. So there's this sense of independence. But, as Adi Da points out, there's not even a molecule of wood in this wall that is independent. It's just a sensation that people take to be. And so, as you try to be independent, which is good, you want to do that, you're deluded by that, and then functionally it doesn't work. Hey, I'm taking off tonight. Mom, can I have the car keys? Dad, can I get $20 for gas? So there's still this, there is no true independence.
Right.
And you are confronted with that functionally as well as internally. So as you oscillate between independence and dependence, you are torn between those two, and that becomes a dilemma. So the background third stage of life is not dependence, and it's not independence, it's dilemma, which kind of drives it to the heart of all of us in some ways. You know, the sense you have of dilemma, oh, whether this, well, yeah, but this, that is a sign of the developing third stage.
So the third stage is the struggle of integrated self-presentation. So there is a sense of a separate individual, but it's not separated out. You're actually integrating your individuality. There is individuality,
of course,
but there's not separateness. There's not a independent, self-motivated, only by me kind of presentation to the world. You now integrate, you're moving from mother, father, sibling, family to now and cultural integration. And the real test of a third stage development is to be integrated. So you must assimilate, you must integrate into the larger culture, which hopefully is one that will give you some wisdom in your heroic journey to
ordinary human maturity, which never happens, by the way, in case you might have noticed. You would hopefully do this.
Meaning that there is no ideal
cultural setting,
cultural place that you are going to find your nirvana. by your own independent will. Now the dilemma is that, because now as you go out, there is this understanding that you're not just a separate individual, you're integrated.
Right. And now, this capacity for separation makes great science. I mean, you look at something, and what would you make postulates? Well, if I did this and I kept this control, and it develops great science. So, advantages of separativeness, this I'm inside my mind and I can look and think about everything. Function is that you make great science and things get very real. Scientific realism is born here. So there's a really good side to this separativeness functionally, because you can make great science, you can come up with your own ideas. You can step back and think about...
I just qualify the separateness, because there really is no separateness in the development of individual. Right.
In a new way, in a new full way.
So I guess one of the liabilities of this development is that you think you're just your thought. You think you're just this mind.
Right. Adi Da points out when the verbal portion of the brain becomes more or less continuous, I becomes identified with thought within. So that whole thing about truth is within is not true. Truth is, as Adi Da says, absolutely not within. There is no within. It's the illusion of self-withdrawal and being confined or attached to a verbal abstraction.
So I guess one of the liabilities of the third stage, or paradoxical kind of thing, you're developing this awareness called mind, identifying it with the self, but also developing a sense of now there's this kind of conceptual and also development of perception and mind and thinking, and I can do this, and as the Moody's Blues says, you know, the best way to travel, thinking is the best way to travel. You're just completely mind. And so, but it's objective mind, it's superficial mind, it's not higher mind, which we'll later talk about, but this is just developmenting of growth of mind and independent thinking of awareness through mind and integrated through mind, abstract. And so part of the problem of that is the attachment to that independent ability, or attachment to the mind as who you are. I. Because really the root of this is this illusion called me.
Right. And now it's formed as eyes talking, as quoting our great rock star fans. No one knows what it's behind blue eyes. No one knows what it's like to be hated, to be faded, to telling only lies, because you tell only lies because you're within. So, so that withinness is the downside, or the negative portion of this capacity to stand apart and think about things, which then becomes manipulativeness. And so you manipulate others. You're separate from others. You just take everything. Well, what you done for me lately, and that kind of failed, immature third stage of life is manipulative. It's certainly self-centered and narcissistic to the point of pathological.
I just wanted to get into the developmental phases here, and so one of the phases third stage represents is a fully sexual character. So now we're developing the feeling of the second stage into now a sexual identity, sexual character. Your male or female biology and psychology is now got to be integrated with the full sense of the human body, the human feeling, and now in the human mind as an integrated, balanced, and human way to interact in the world with others who are now developing in that same capacities there.
Right. The word you use, integration, is key here. Talk about, and we can kind of the two phases or the two aspects of the third stage. The onset where you're developing lever, you're able to stand apart and think about something objectively, etc., etc. Second phase of it, where that cleverness becomes more discriminative, where that will instead of becomes, I'm going to start harmonizing. I'm going to start integrating, and like you talked about earlier about the frontal personality. And so you're integrating the aspects of your body, harmonizing it via understanding and will. You integrate you start integrating the emotions via understanding and will. You understand so that's kind of phase of this developmental stage. The first phase is the onset of it, where you're more subject to the dark side of it.
Right. And an element of the third stage, a key element, which many people struggle with, is a thing called discipline.
No!
Because this independent mind and this independent of feeling and this independent of identity does not want to be controlled.
Yeah.
It has an infinite capacity for enjoyment, infinite capacity for pleasure, infinite all of the bodily and exploitations, but it does not be mastered. It does not want to be disciplined. It wants to be independent of any outside control. And there's where the key in terms of developing a third stage orientation is the self-discipline. Now you now are hip to this larger force of what you're involved with here. So,
right. Because you discriminate to the failure of your manipulative modality.
Right.
And so I like to point out the third stage of life, to fulfill it or to exceed it is never a good idea. I mean, good idea. It is a good idea, but it's not done that way. You have the master says, if we only understand the harm in which we act. And so this manipulative person, with all of its psychological and bodily, emotional dysfunctions, you see how that is not harmonized, and you see how we harm others with the compensatory aspects of our personality. So we have to turn about from that. We understand sufficiently enough to know that we're not independent like we think we want to be.
Or separate.
Or separate. The adolescent individual wants someone to save him. The adolescent individual wants it to be fulfilled independently. He wants it. Therefore, I don't need no stinking guru is a sign of the failed adaptation of the third stage. They want to do it themselves.
Or in the same way that a child will say, I do not want my parents to tell me. Because basically what third stage in this whole mind development is that you begin to see is that the struggle with parent, which is really a fundamental first stage issue here, expressing itself as you develop, is about authority. It is about knowing that there is some kind of a limit and you're not unlimited in your own separateness. And so the struggle with this is the struggle with authority, a struggle with discipline, or somebody in even your own discipline, in your own authority of discriminative intelligence. That this is the struggle. You don't want to discipline the body. You don't want to discipline the food that you're eating. You want to indulge your food. You want to indulge your feeling and sexuality.
Because you're within, and the only mediation you have is by exploitation, manipulation, and because you've lost yourself. You're lost in your interiority.
Right. Well, you're not even hip. You're not hip to what's going on. So you're lost the possibilities of pleasure, the possibilities of the excitement, the thrill of life. But life has its way of reflecting back to you.
You think? And that's why, again...
And here's the problem, is that an undeveloped always, and this you could say, you are the victim. Third stage people are always, undeveloped third stage people, are always the victim. because this kind of movement is always going to be reflected back sooner or later as a failure.
Right. I like to say we live in a time where if you can name it, which is concept, you can be irresponsible for it. Well, I'm sorry, I have a, you know.
Now remember, this is not just on an individual basis, because Adi Da speaks of the time in which we live, an adolescent or third stage world development. So this kind of psychology is now on a political or a national level.
Global.
It's like, you know, the fences that people build between the geographical demarcations of where a country is and where my neighborhood is now, you're going to harm me. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to send a diplomat out there. But yet we still have this sense of I'm the victim.
Right, and
or
this
threatened.
And historically, in the cultural geopolitical onset of this was the Declaration of Independence, and so no longer was Daddy King, King Daddy, the how we related to one another.
Second stage.
Second stage. It's the first and second stage, right. And so now they make a Declaration of Independence, and the onset of science was that same period. But the downside...
The Enlightenment.
Right, relative to mythic and magical, yes. Right. And then the dark side of that independence, death camps of Hitler. You see this utter manipulativeness. And we are involved, in case you don't know, notice, turn on a TV, it's a teenage wasteland. So our present culture is a adolescent culture, and so it's not just self. This is the culture in which we live.
Right, yeah.
And we each may want to just exploit ourselves for the sensation of what is all pervading. It spirals down, and it becomes a wasteland, both individually and culturally, and geopolitically.
Right. So it's kind of a two-sided coin here, a forked kind of approach, is that you must develop fully as an independent, not separate, but independent, moving away from the parenting,
embeddedness of your child,
integrating into a cultural circumstance. Now, if your cultural circumstance is not fully higher wisdom teaching,
it's harder.
It's very difficult, and that's where the culture is key in any developmental phase, and where Joseph Campbell and the whole mythology of this journey that everybody must embark on and move away from the safety and the security of the family and the tribe, and you must enter into the dark forest. This is the unknown. This is the Iron John down into the bottom of the lake.
Right. The hero's journey is the unconscious darkness, subconscious darkness, where you get to see your own maladaptations.
And this is key, because reflective mechanism of the universe. Third stage development, which tends to be objective, discriminative. The full development of the third stage is that, guess what? We're leaving the subject out here. And so this is shown if you fully take that journey. At some point people don't fully take that journey and they retreat back into some kind of... But this is where you're shown as you move and integrate into a larger context. There's a subject back here who is kind of
forgotten.
The forgotten self that is this me.
Right.
That independent self.
In the Vedas, we talked about earlier in the other previous talks, sessions, they said that you treat first stagers as gods. In other words, to translate that, it's a great nurturing culture. You treat the second stagers as servants. In other words, not that they have to be your slave, but rather they out their energy, participate energetically out from themselves. In the third stage, they say you treat your third stager is a time of trial adulthood. Trial meaning they will fail. So, so frame this developmental phase. It is a period that we're trying, as we only develop the mind, we set it to the harmonization of the lower life, the harmonization of me and self with others and the culture. We integrate all of those. So those, it is as we should do as adults. That's what is this task of that third stage, is to be adults, to bring all the intention and understanding to bear on self, and personally, and then self with others. So and that does harmonize this, what you called earlier, this frontal personality, where then you can rest, you can let the mind be resolved in attention to what is beyond the sophomoric eye.
Right, and until that trial, because it is about, you never learn from your successes. You only learn.
What do you mean?
Well, as a basketball player, and I can't remember, maybe it was Michael Jordan said, I never learned from my successes, I only learned from my failures.
I get it.
I mean, it's only by, as Buckminster Fuller used to say, error correction, the mistake, mystique. It says life is like walking on the right foot, left foot, but it's always an era of balance. It's always a homeostasis. So you must go into imbalance to achieve balance, to walk into the world, to integrate, to speak, to integrate, to work with people.
I get it. So you become, so then you become self, separate self, I, understand, will, but then immediately you're on, then you have to then integrate that with others, and so you go between this dependence, independence, till you hang of walking then.
And compromising, and integrating, and working with instead of dominating.
I see.
And,
that's great.
And the era of the third stage is power.
My way or the
where
highway.
Will now becomes power. And so at a level of a baseball game, you know, I'm going to shoot you. At the level of the political conference in Geneva, it's I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to dominate you, I'm going to rule the world. And it's the same psychology. It's madness if we don't get it into a feeling, second stage stuff, into a we're connected. We're not separate. We're independent. We have independent cultures, we have independent languages, we have independent bodies, but we're not separate. We realize that in the second stage. The third stage, with discrimination as mind, now this is the culprit, the devil, because now you're the controller, and so thrown to the higher levels of mind, and you can go to madness with mind.
Or, and this is Milton's Angels, of course, a fifth stage error, but nevertheless it's based in this. I've reached now, I am God. He does become the devil. That is how the devil arises in Christian mythology, is he takes God to be himself. And then he's cast down. One other thing I wanted to say about, shoot, I forgot.
Okay, let's just take a break.
Stop. And you know, I heard this thing go beep.
That's that.
Oh, that's that. Oh. Yeah, let's take a break and look at all our notes.